There's probably never an easy time to be a defense secretary, but right now there's really a lot on Pete Hegseth's plate. He's been trying to downplay reports of a mental health crisis and dwindling rations on the USS Abraham Lincoln, the aircraft carrier supporting operations for Trump's war of choice in Iran. He's also confronting a president scrambling our traditional alliances, punishing South Korea because they didn't want to get involved in the war in Iran, scaling back, joining military drills, and once again praising Kim Jong-un. With all this going on, and it is a lot, you might think Hegseth doesn't have time for anything but focusing on national security. But you would be wrong, because Hegseth was in Iowa yesterday, fundraising for a Republican congressman. I want to bring Atlantic staff writer Tom Nichols and MS Now Pentagon reporter Priya Sridhar. Tom, Hegseth, he has time to hit the campaign trail with everything else going on?
He has a record now in his job of doing everything except his job. He seems to think his job is being a sycophant to the president, working out with the troops, getting some jungle training in, doing all kinds of things that would be perfectly reasonable if he were still a captain in the Army, but are not the job of a Secretary of Defense. And meanwhile, all of the other problems that you mentioned start to pile up, including losing a war. In any other administration, Hegseth would be gone over these issues. But this is not any other administration. He knows that keeping an audience of one happy is his job, and then taking time out in his, I hate to ever use air quotes, but his personal capacity to go to Iowa to campaign for people. You have to wonder what people in Iowa are thinking about why the Secretary of Defense is out there while people are, on board ships for long deployments, and we're in the middle of a war with a country of 93 million people.
Yeah, let's talk about the air quotes that Tom just used there, Priya. I know we talk a lot about norms. Is there any world where another defense secretary, where a James Mattis or a Mark Esper would be stumping for the midterms?
Yeah, Alicia, this is a huge departure from the way we would traditionally see Secretary of Defenses in public. Of course, they are political appointees, but the military as an institution is supposed to be apolitical. Obviously, uniformed members of the military are forbidden from going to campaign events or making sort of political opinions. But this isn't even the first time we've seen Secretary of Defense Hegseth do this. Back in May, he went to Kentucky and sort of slammed Representative Thomas Massie, who, of course, had a falling out with President Trump, and he endorsed his opponent, who ended up winning that primary. So we've seen Secretary Hegseth insert politics into everything in the military, including trying to sort of wage these culture wars that President Trump has also tried to do, speaking about woke culture in the military, trying to get rid of DEI policies, and also firing any senior military officers or blocking their promotions who he believes sort of tried to promote ideologies that were consistent with previous administrations. So while this is not normal for any previous secretaries of defense, it's definitely on brand for Secretary Hegseth.
What a brand that is. Tom, you've been writing Trump is making South Korea pay for his Iran humiliation. I want to play some of what the president said about his decision to scale back joint military drills with South Korea. Take a listen.
I said, would you like to give us a little hand? We don't need help with Iran, but if you'd like, give us a hand with Iran. He said, no, thanks. And I said, wait a minute, we have 39,000 soldiers over there guarding you from Kim Jong-un, your next door neighbor, and you're not going to help us on a very easy military operation in Iran? That's strange. No, we'd rather not get involved. I say, well, why are we involved in helping you?
So yesterday, Tom, I was on with Priya, who in her former role as a U.S. Navy officer had actually done some of these drills. And Priya reminded me that it is about the fact that when all of a sudden, God forbid, you end up in a scenario where you actually have to execute on some of these plans, you don't want it to be the first time when the stakes are high and the consequences matter. You want to have this experience of having done the drill, of having figured out how to work together. And what is so wrong about what the president said in that clip is he acts as though we are doing South Korea a favor, as though there is no strategic rationale for the United States to be conducting those drills and positioned there. Talk to me about what he is getting wrong about the U.S.'s national security.
Okay, first, everything.
Sorry.
I mean, that sums it up right there. But, the other problem here is, first of all, that whole conversation that he just relayed, you can choose to believe that that's how it happened. Can't imagine the South Koreans saying that. But also, if Iran is such an easy lift, why do we need the South Koreans? Leaving that aside, we're ignoring, or Donald Trump especially is ignoring, thousands of North Korean troops who are fighting alongside Russians in Europe against a friend of the United States, gaining battle experience by fighting in Europe with Russia. And what Trump ought to be saying to the South Koreans is, how can we make North Korea pay for this insane adventurism with North Korean troops running around in Europe? And instead, he's treating the South Koreans as if they are, somebody that's really let him down. And I think that that's part of his rage about Iran. He can't make Iran pay. He's afraid of Russia. He's afraid of China. He's afraid of offending the North Koreans. And so he's going to lash out at people who he thinks just have to stand there and take it. The fact of the matter is, and Priya, having been involved in these, knows this, one of the great dangers in Korea is that the North Koreans basically hold the South Korean capital hostage because it is so close to their border. It's one of the most dangerous places in the world. And we're there to defend a friend, to stand up for what's right, and also to defend a system of trade and security that spans the globe and protects the safety and the standard of living of Americans, even if they don't realize that. If Americans want to live in a world where the Chinese and the Russians make the rules of the international system, we can do that. But people aren't going to like it. And by the time they figure out it's happening, it'll be too late.
Tom, I asked you what the president was getting wrong about national security. You said everything. Thank you for elucidating exactly what you meant by everything. Tom Nichols, Priya Sridhar, thank you both so much for being with us.